Hello, hello, everyone. Welcome in. Welcome in. Everybody's filling in from the waiting room. We had quite a big waiting room, so we're going to give it a few seconds for everybody to join us in our webinar here today. Thank you so much for joining us. As you start filing in, you can see it down there on the bottom of the screen. Please introduce yourself in the chat. Put your name, your role, the institution that you're at. Please, please, please introduce yourself as you start coming in. Use that chat function. Optional, if you want to share one thing that you hope to learn or gain from today's session, please feel free to add that in there. We'll get started in just a few seconds. Looks like we've still got a few people joining in. But once again, thank you so much for joining today. Please use the chat function to introduce yourself, put your name, your role, the institution that you're at. And if you would like, add something in there about what you are interested in learning about today. Looks like people are still trickling in, but we're slowing down a little bit so we can go ahead and start moving forward. So let's get started. Once again, one last time, as you come in, put your name, your role, the institution you're at, and maybe one thing you're interested in learning about today into the chat. But before we jump over into introductions of myself and Miguel, I wanted to throw it over to Dr. Rufus Glasper to kind of give us some, lay the ground a little bit for us today. Dr. Glasper.
Well, Reed, thank you very much, and welcome everyone to our 12th session regarding generative AI, large language models, classroom effect, and as the title indicates here, education and generative AI monthly. The League is excited to continue our conversation and our partnership with PackBack relative to AI. We are using a lot of the comments and questions and thoughts to help frame our future conferences. We have a high focus on teaching and learning. About 60% of our Innovations Conference are faculty members. And as I look at the conversations that we've had over the last 12 months or so, intermittent with vacation time and others, we've had a lot of growth. We've had a lot of growth institution-wide, a lot of growth with our students. We're beginning to understand how they utilize AI, and we're also getting to know how our institutions should be framing their institutional policies and the engagement of faculty with administration, and administration with the board, and the board with the public, and everyone trying to figure out what's next. So I'm excited about this conversation, excited to see that we have so many individuals who are still interested in sharing their thoughts about what's happening at their institution and helping us help frame the future for AI and the future for our students and our faculty who are taking the lead. So with that, I'll turn it back to you, Reed, and invite everyone to participate. And we look forward to the conversation today.
Thank you so much, Dr. Glasper. As he said, today's monthly roundup focusing on helping students become AI literate. We've got a great panelist here with us that I'm super excited to introduce here in a second. But before we get to that, some housekeeping rules here. The webinar recording and the attendee certificate will actually be shared with all of you within 2 days, but you can always access the recordings at packback.co/webinars. Just a quick difference to keep us all in line between the Q&A and the chat features here in the webinar today. Please ask all your questions within the Q&A feature. That's where Peter is going to be able to keep an eye on those, and they can be upvoted there so that maybe we get our panelist Miguel to take a look at those and answer some of those questions. If you are interested in conversing between you and some other attendees, please use the chat feature there, as you can continue to have conversations in the chat, but reserve those questions for the Q&A feature. We've got time at the end of our session today specifically to answer some of those questions and get Miguel's thoughts on some of those questions that you'll be asking. And with that, let's have some introductions. So first off, my name is Reed Malone, originally from right outside of Dallas, Texas. I was a classroom teacher in the K-12 space for 4 years before joining PackBack. I was a high school math and 7th grade science teacher while I coached volleyball in a couple districts here in the state of Arkansas. but joined PackBack. And in my first year and a few months, I've been here over 2 years now. In my first year and 2 months here, I worked with professors like many of you on a daily basis to help implement PackBack in all of your classes. But I'm super excited to be here today hosting this webinar with you. And without further ado, I'd love to introduce our esteemed panelists today. Miguel Fernandez, a professor of composition creative writing at Chandler Gibert Community College. And he can do a much better job introducing himself. So I'm going to let you, Miguel, take the spotlight for a second.
Well, thank you, and welcome to everybody. My name is Miguel Fernandez, originally from Harlem, New York, but now in Arizona, teaching for Chandler Gibert Community College. So I started in education as an academic advisor for NYU and Stevens Institute engineering program, but I've been a residential faculty in composition, literature, and creative writing at Chandler Gibert for 19 years now, and was exposed to AI early, so ChatGPT 2.0. And finding ways that that could be integrated into teaching and things like that, as well as for easing the teaching burden and making teaching a better, successful venture is kind of where I've been focusing, and taught 20 sections. Now it'll be 24 of composition using AI literacy and embedding AI tools. So I've got the feedback, I've made the mistakes, and I've made the improvements with about 350 students' feedback so far using AI and AI literacy as part of and integrated into composition.
Thanks, Miguel. Thank you so much. We're super excited to have you in here on our conversation today. Let's jump into an agenda for what we're going to talk about today. Now, I do want to make a disclaimer. Miguel's aware of this. Want to make all of you aware of this. This is our tentative agenda, right? We've got some slides here that we want to go through to kind of keep us on track, but Miguel is a fantastic resource of knowledge and information on this topic. So if we start to veer, it's because it's such a wealthy conversation to have. So we may stray slightly from this, but our intention is to get to what are some teaching concerns around AI, how AI can be used to promote student success, using AI to rethink teaching approaches, and then leaving some time for an audience Q&A. But first, I want to start with pointing that spotlight right back on you, Miguel, asking you a couple questions about you and your journey, and just hearing more details around kind of what brings you to the space that you're in today. So first and foremost, I heard you mention you kind of got a start with large language models and GPT very early. How did your AI journey begin?
Gotcha. So some of it was circumstantial. It was just popping up in conversation about technology. But then I also did a master's in 2022 in intelligence studies and national security, where AI was integrated and showing up pretty maturely. And I'm making all kinds of connections to, wow, this could really play a role in teaching. So I was exposed through things like NVivo, which is dissertation writing software, and it was using AI, technical AI, to find relationships in coding. So for those who are on that kind of track, that was already starting there. And then in some software like Primer AI or Maltego, it was being used to look at information and distill it into insights, summaries, and other things. So that kind of put on the light bulb. When I finished that degree, I decided and got permission and met all the compliance stuff with my department chair to have some pilot courses where this was integrated among other technology and other ideas into the teaching of composition. And now 20 completed sections of English 101 and 102 with a very interdisciplinary approach and with applied AI and kind of wrangling the hype added to it with students' direct experience. About 350 students, 93% total surveyed so far say that this was a very useful skill as a first-year experience that they expected to use in other courses. So refined it from that pilot stage over many sections to get now where it's kind of a mainstream thing, and it has all the factors that we'll talk about, whether it's personalization or guardrails. It's a truly exciting experience for students. It helps with retention and allows them to build up a skill set that they feel education is serving. And you'll see with some of the slides coming up, what the career is looking, being able to decipher and diffuse the hype and feel like no matter where they enter into the equitable learning spectrum, feel like they have a shot at being competitive and understanding where their career can be with AI embedded in ways that make sense and not just novelty.
Right, right. I love all of that. I mean, but it sounds like you've got such a multifaceted viewpoint and experience with AI, considering you started kind of as a student utilizing AI through your grad program, and then immediately transitioned into having some experience with it as a teacher, using it with your students. I'd love for you to talk a little bit about, before we move on, the juxtaposition there between and your thought changes about AI when you went from utilizing it as a student in your first introduction with it to then using it with your students as a teacher?
That's a great question. So using it as a student, as a grad student, what I'm trying to do is to save time, get better results, keep critical thinking embedded in there, which was one of the big spotlights. AI at that point was hallucinating as much as ever, but all of these were concepts that were kind of find it, explore it, and discover it. So as I'm using it as a student, I'm taking notes as to how it can be applied to especially my students. So as a freshman composition course, we kind of are feeding not so much to English majors, but feeding all disciplines. So the interdisciplinary lens is on at all times as to how will this improve success of students? How can we avoid the misuse, which instantly pops up? And as ChatGPT and Bing and Gemini matured, you could see how to discourage, because from the beginning I could tell we can't police it. It's getting fast, it's getting good. Policing it is just adding work to the teachers. How do we encourage students to organically understand that misuse is short-term advantage, long-term fail with regards to learning? And then once you have that, have them see how it integrates interdisciplinarily in the world that they're hoping to enter and succeed in as students venturing either into transfer, into particular disciplines, or workforce.
So glad you mentioned all of that, because I think we're going to hit on quite a few of those topics as we get into our conversation today. And let's jump into it then. First and foremost, I want to say to all of you here today, don't think you're getting away without any type of interaction here. We've got a couple polls that we're going to ask you to participate in. Peter should be jumping that up on your screen as we speak. The first poll asking, what concerns you most about the integration of AI in education? You see some responses there for you. What concerns you most about the integration of AI in education? And at the risk of swaying some of these answers, I would like to hear your thoughts on this, Miguel.
So I'm looking at those, and for me, the critical thinking part is probably high on there, just because it can create students who kind of fake it till they make it, which is something we don't want. We want them to value lifelong learning. And if you teach AI in an integrated way, you do create that ethos, you do embed that as a value. And that's a win-win for you as your current professor teaching students or whatever role you have, as well as creating an educated workforce, which is what we need for dealing with civic issues, use issues, abuse issues of AI.
Thank you so much. I'm curious to see where our results fall. And as expected, I had a feeling that a majority of our participants today would agree with you with the critical thinking aspects there. It looks like we're pretty even when it comes to academic dishonesty, lack of sufficient AI-related training, and then also the over-reliance on AI, reducing the quality of learning. So thank you so much for your thoughts. That will not be the last time you are asked to participate today. So be prepared to click on some more of those answers. That's all we're asking you to do, if that's all you want to do in participation today. But let's jump into our next topic here. We've got two slides. This first one being teachers' thoughts, second being students' thoughts. This is something that you kind of brought to us, but this is where teachers were asked their thoughts on AI. And when you look at these answers from teachers, where the larger the word in these wordles, the more frequent that answer was given. What do you take away?
Gotcha. So this was originally from a development session, training the trainer, training faculty in 2023. So ChatGPT was still on the more hype than experience scale. And from what people knew going in, this is what popped up for faculty and some administrators, but faculty typically as the big issues and concerns. And as you can see, based on the size, ethics was a big issue, writing, plagiarism, workforce, all of these. And this was interesting because up to that point, I think it was 17 sessions of students with, let's say, 18 to 25. And you're going to see kind of where the students in 2023 have a slightly different take and when there's overlap.
Yeah, so let's just go ahead and jump over there and we can get that those juxtaposed thoughts from you.
Gotcha. So in 2023, it was starting to make headway in high school. And its first kind of big adoption was, hey, it's kind of a how to have it write your paper, how to meet that deadline when you can't. Kind of the misuse, abuse, more than what real potential it had. And you see that in kind of the student results. So at that point, again, 17 sections, maybe 280 students or so. It's the future, it's coming. Teachers should use, which was interesting because that popped up as like in other polls that we'll see, there's an expectation that students want this to be used. My favorite was a student who said not using it was like going to a class where they're using 8-track tapes, ancient technology. So there's that kind of thing. But as you can also see, the tool aspect, saving time, and I like that thinking popped up among a lot of students. So
For sure.
that's a good win.
For sure. I love that thinking popped up there as well, because as you mentioned earlier, and as we saw with our poll results, the biggest concern we have is that it's going to diminish the critical thought that students have to have as they go through their academic careers. I also love the metaphor that we may take a step back and think not using AI in your classes or not having that discussion is like going to a class and they're using 8-track tapes or slide presentations where you have to bring the slides. That seems like a little bit of an exaggeration at first glance, right? But when you consider how fast and the exponential growth of how fast technology is changing, is that an exaggeration? I mean, considering that those technologies were used in the 70s, 80s, even some into the 90s and early 2000s. So it's been a while, right? At least 24 years, all the way back to 1999. So you wouldn't think that something that just kind of popped up in our minds of education just 2 years ago would have put us that far behind if we're not talking about it.
And
But considering the exponential growth there, go ahead.
No, and it's a generational leap too. Kind of the early adopters is the bulk of the Gen Z. And the way it was showing up in 2023 was on Reddit, was on, all these kind of insider viewpoints with a lot of hype attached. So not a lot of people from the student age group were having direct experience yet. It was kind of the influencer and the early adopters and the hype from both the Gartner hype cycle, if you study that, where it enters into the market, and kind of like the same way that a video game that's just breaking has all this hype, all this fandom. Kind of that was the initial approach because there wasn't a lot of hands-on experience and there wasn't a lot of hands-on exposure from the formal education side of teachers yet. So it was the edge, the innovators, but now it's pretty much mainstream, which echoes where there's crossover between the students now and the teachers now.
I love you mentioned the crossover and the gap that was between when it first came out and to where it is now. Yeah, how many of our educators and people making decisions about curriculum and what's taught in classes were on Reddit whenever ChatGPT started blowing up on Reddit? We're paying attention to these, as you mentioned as a metaphor, these newer video games, right, that are coming out. Obviously, we're talking about something like ChatGPT, but these forms of communication and news that students were seeing before teachers had the chance to. I can remember exactly where I was when it really, really hit. My brother, who is a computer science, he's a computer science engineer actually for TikTok, and he called me. I was at a car wash, and he said, "Have you seen this ChatGPT thing? This thing is crazy. It's gonna change the world." I had actually just seen a story that morning come across my Google News, but he had seen it on Reddit, as you mentioned. And it was almost this moment of, okay, now how fast or how long is it going to take for the people I work with, higher ed professors, to come across this news, and how long is it going to be till we can have intelligent, experience-based conversations? And it took a while. It took a long while to be able to have those conversations with professors. Of course, not professors like you who were ready to jump in and were kind of ahead of the game, but the vast majority of professors who took some time to bridge that gap.
And what's really exciting is once the hype died down, the crossover potential with what our goals are as teachers to not just prepare for people for what the latest, greatest tool is, but to emphasize thinking popped up. The biggest crossover I see is with media literacy, critical thinking, credibility, disinformation, misinformation, because AI comes prepackaged with the risk of hallucinations and the risks of fails and wrongful things. And once that entered the conversation, that it wasn't a sci-fi reasoning tool, then it goes back to our fundamentals as educators, which is think for yourself, evaluate, and do not just give up your responsibility in decision-making. Human in the loop is where it goes to now, and that's a perfect crossover and transition to the next slide.
Yeah, that's why I started clicking next, because I mean, you're beautifully transitioning to what we're talking about next, which is those guardrails. You've kind of already started mentioning guardrails that, from one sense, that teachers need to have, that educators need to have, administrators need to have around their own thoughts around AI and how they potentially see the use in education. Obviously, our conversation here in the next few slides is going to be more around the guardrails that actual instructors are using with AI in their classrooms, but you've already kind of hinted at some of the risks and how some of those risks may be worth taking, but how do we manage them is the main point. Next slide is going to ask you for some more participation, you participants out there. This one's actually in the chat. I'd love to see some of your answers around what guardrails have you set for AI usage. I think we've seen some answers already come in there. Peter, help me with that if we have seen some of those come in. But Miguel, I'd love to hear from you while everybody else is throwing their answers in the chat.
Gotcha. So while people are putting in their answers in the chat, so the first thing I had to do from my department was prove to my department chair that I was not adding AI for novelty, that I was meeting all the writing requisites and using this as a tool to meet those goals. So right there, the first step was having a syllabus statement and making sure that students are aware in that contract that what is allowed and what is not allowed. And as our district caught up, we had district statements, but I had more specific stuff with regards to how I allowed it or not. I also had it added to the rubric, and I had to create specific assignments and discussions modeling what was allowed and not allowed for AI use, where the focus was always on augmenting, personalizing, tutoring type support and not end product support. And that had to be put in various stages and became essential to understanding how guardrails would allow a student to succeed with using AI and alert them and make sure they understood what wouldn't be allowed, what was misuse in any kind of application, GPT or otherwise.
Looking through the chat, I'm seeing a lot, a wide range, right? All the way from some people saying, I have no guardrails around this. It's the Wild West, go ahead, all the way to 100% prohibited. We are not using this, whether that's a professor decision or an institution decision at large. I'm also seeing a lot of people saying, you must cite if you've used this in some form or fashion, right? We're talking about a very strict, if you've used it, cite it. It's very plain Jane, very right in front of your face. I loved how your thoughts on guardrails were more around a thought process, around instead of it just being about the product, rather your guardrails are more around what students are doing while they're developing these thoughts. Could you speak more to that in terms of those guardrails?
Sure. So again, for my particular discipline, end product writing, kind of plagiarism detection, not creating your own work is a key element that we needed to avoid. And at first, I'm using GPT detectors, kind of the built-in tools and things like that. And then as ChatGPT went from 2 to 3 and then 3 to 4, it became very difficult. And even the creators of the detectors were saying, look, 30%, that's as accurate as we can get. And there's certain stuff that from experience of teaching 19 years, writing, you understand and can see. However, what did work better was demonstrating to students what is and isn't in a ChatGPT. And we do an activity, do a red team activity, which is we have 2 teams of students, or it could be students versus teacher. One team of students is tasked with creating a great draft and then using AI in any way they want to improve that towards an A. And then the next day, the other team of students has to spot what did ChatGPT or Bing or Gemini change? What are telltale signs that this was not the student's original work? And what questions could they ask? So they got to participate in that. And almost invariably, the team that was charged with detecting it put on that teacher's mindset, but they also brought that tech savviness. It's like, okay, this doesn't sound in the same voice. Okay, I've seen this. This even has a statement that says, in your essay, as opposed to in my essay. And by demonstrating, rather than just reading out a do not use for plagiarism, you created thinking, understanding of the process, and ultimately a better deterrence, because they could think if their peers can detect it, well, what can the teacher detect? And what's the risk versus the time saved on there?
I think you hit on something that's so important in that it's not just about laying down the law, but allowing the students to participate in the practice of that law, right? It's not just about saying, hey, you can't use this for plagiarism, or you need to cite if you do use this, but rather having them go through a practice that's interactive with you, but also their classmates, to have them almost be a part of the process of creating these guardrails and seeing why. That's something that is so much more important every day, and every new class that comes in, students need to know why things are the way they are, and having them be a part of an activity like you mentioned there is so huge. I want to take the conversation to a study that I'd love for you to kind of outline here, and then maybe give some of your thoughts on the results.
Sure. So plenty of studies now, and we discuss these, and we usually do maybe once every 3 or 4 weeks, look at some study related to AI use, either in the workforce or in education. Again, to create that participation aspect and to normalize those discussions. So here on the left side, and I think this is from Inside Higher Ed, student expectations in different fields and AI impact. So students understand that, hey, this is an issue beyond education, both on the ethics and compliance, what consequences are going to happen if you get caught using this as part of your work in a way that's not allowed or that's not accepted, as well as how to better be prepared so that you focus on the learning more than necessarily the regurgitating of facts or demonstrating of skills. Because again, with education, the idea is mastery of something towards application of something in the real world. And the consequence of that is embedding the idea of lifelong learning, because no matter where you're at, you need to continue to improve your skills. And AI's role in that shows up in a lot of the surveys and a lot of the concerns and worries. And then on the other side of that survey, again, inside higher ed, is expectation. As hype increases, but also gets deciphered and taken apart as students are exposed, as students see about AI included in workplace and job applications, in graduate and scholarship applications, they want to be better prepared, and they expect it as a baseline. But you don't want them to expect it as a baseline, like, okay, now you got to learn coding. No, you explain and you showcase integrated into what you already teach. If you teach it that way, there's added value to the tool being used in your discipline, And there's also a relaxation that AI is this sci-fi level reasoning, going to take over the world kind of thing. So it creates a balance, but more importantly, all of these surveys and things showcase that students are owning what they want to do, and they want guidance as to how to get to where they want to in their careers, ideas, and ultimately civil responsibilities as a citizen, as well as educated citizens.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's very clear in here too. It's very visual. You can see that as the class gets younger and younger, those expectations get higher and higher, right? It's more frequent that they expect to learn about AI and that it's going to influence what they do in their future. I question and I wonder, that class of 2024, are we catching some of those people who are just resistant because they are so far down the line in their education career that they just can't see, oh no, I can't think of having to pivot. I'm in my last year. And then as it gets younger and younger, we see students who see that they've got more time to pivot, see that they've got more time to make other decisions and go down those paths. Would you expect to see these numbers continuing this trend?
Yes, and you make great points there. So class of 2024, I saw AI being used by mostly technical STEM majors. So the engineering, the computer science, that was popping up on their radar as an essential skill set for 21st century success. Now I'm looking at class of 2026 and 2027, and I've got my drama majors. I've got people who are doing accounting and finance. General business, they're all looking at it as an integrated part because, again, it's gone mainstream. It's no longer just for that STEM science application, and that's the GPT side. So one of the basic things you want to make as a learning goal is to show how interdisciplinary AI as a tool is, as opposed to the very isolated image that it had as a technology major tool. And then once you get that buy-in, you get a little less resistance, higher expectation, and with that higher expectation, a desire to use it in a way that's not misuse or abuse, but something that makes sense to thinking process.
Once again, very timely transition to what we're talking about next. It's very clear that AI literacy, or at least awareness, is something that's becoming more and more important in education for both students and teachers. But with that, we should also be aware of how AI can be misused in our field as well. In our prepping conversations, you mentioned some levels of misuse of AI, and I'd love for you to hit on those for a few minutes, if you would.
Absolutely. So on this slide, you'll see the three major levels of AI misuse in an academic setting. The first one is the most obvious, which is academic misuse. That's gaming the assignment, plagiarism, and creating GPT prompts for synthetic end products. And what that means is it's not the product of synthesized thinking, but it is, hey, I have a deadline, I just need something. Hey, I need to get that A. And that's this traditional plagiarism style academic misuse. And it shows up in coding, it shows up in writing, but it also, because of the advancements with the latest versions of that GPT technology, showing up in discussion boards. Students are automating discussion boards. And even now, video, the idea of AI used for twinning, creating a video presence that shows up into your Zoom or webinar or WebEx class, that's on the horizon. So that's traditional academic misuse, meaning synthetic process, synthetic products, and passing it as their own. Now, the second and the third are kind of the more deeper, higher learning, more concerning ones. The academic misuse, that's the grade as the motivator. For these two, it's you're losing students as lifelong learners. The second one about dulling critical thinking by allowing AI to take the driver's seat is replacing decision making. So imagine you've got students progressing down the line in politics, in science, and they've neglected to see the bigger picture of decision making because they've taken AI shortcuts. That's a real misuse of it. They're skipping second order thinking and evaluation. They're skipping the scientific method. They're skipping how to use a framework. to arrive at an answer rather than just produce an answer, whether it's correct or not. So that's a skill set that gets built by learning and experience and education. And that is one of the more important things to discourage. And most students, even under pressure, will see that as a value loss if they use AI for that. And then the last one is the ethical issues, which again, you saw from that teacher poll, that's the big concern. Or using AI to fake it till you make it. What do I mean by that? Basically, I'm talking about using AI to fake learning as progression, whether it's towards a certificate. And what happens when you've not done the learning process and you arrived at an advanced class, at a clinical application, or you're live on the job, and that AI tool is not there to be able to, when you're doing higher functions, that could be of consequences in legal settings where you rely or over rely on it releasing case laws or case examples. In nursing, okay, you haven't studied how to get an honest history from a patient, and you use AI to do that. And that can lead to bigger issues. And that's also where you can level the ethical stuff. Why you shouldn't use it, even if it will get you past a current hurdle, because ultimately you still lose the race if you faked it rather than actually gone for the fruits of true learning and education.
It's almost like a tiered step, right? That first one, the academic misuse in terms of plagiarism and so on and so forth, and then a step down, it almost gets more serious in terms of consequences, and more serious in terms of consequences when it comes to the future of education and also the future of society as a whole, right? It's interesting though, when we look at the knee-jerk responses of institutions and of classroom teachers at a very minute role, or a very microscopic look at it, where have most of our AI policies been focused on? Where have most of our AI rules and regulations that have come out since focused on? I would venture to say much of which have been focused around that first level, right? Is that because that's where the focus is right now, or is that because that's the easiest for us to hit on when we don't really understand what those consequences are, how to negate misuse in the second and third level in our metaphor we're using here? And when do you see us being education community as a whole, being able to create and have conversations around policies at that second and third level?
Well, that's spot on. So that academic misuse is, I would say, 80% of the energy being thrown into policies as well as enforcement. The problem is you sign up to be instructors, not police. And the second problem is the problem from the cybersecurity hacker world. No matter how good your measure is to defeat or defend against academic end product misuse, give it a week, someone has already solved it and done it better. And that was the initial surge in detecting systems, tools for detecting. And again, they were good for a while. The ChatGPT technologies got better, and no longer can you rely on it. And there are Reddit threads where all it's about is you get accused of using AI and you did. Here's how to prove or wear out your teacher so that they leave you alone. So it's a fight uphill that will never end. It's that Sisyphus rolling the boulder. So what I found works, because we still do have to police and patrol the compliance with learning, have the students do that red teaming and have them run through detection tools so that they see how it works and that how it gives a peer a hint of your misuse. And that reduces your chances of using it. Will it ever be to zero? Will it ever be perfect? No, it won't. And your policy needs to make that clear. And that's with demonstrated examples. And again, if you lead students, teach students, and participate in what comes off as AI signals and why you shouldn't, then you'll get to the two deeper consequences and two deeper misuse, which is where you will get ethical buy-in, but also practical buy-in. And you can use that or you can achieve that by demonstrating what happened in the real world when someone was caught. And there are plenty of cases that you can find in places like the AI incident database. You know, a lawyer who used AI and they created a fake case study, and now they can't find work because they're ostracized. Let the students reach that organically. Do have basic rules against misuse, and be very clear in your syllabus statement with models, but also with activities. This is what is allowed, which has to do with personalizing tutoring or interdisciplinary. This is what's not allowed. And it's not in your interest long-term to cheat or use it in the basic way.
So then I think the question becomes, what's more important? Just having a policy that addresses these levels, or having the policy, but then also following it up with activities and conversations and actually integrating this policy into your class rather than just having it on your syllabus? Obviously, that is very, very, very important. But is that enough at this point, as it may have been in the past?
Again, I think you're spot on with that too. And that's where it becomes conversations at the department and the discipline and the administrative level together. And together is where you really do, whether it's coding, where there's ease of misuse, real easy, technical writing or discussion groups, manufactured and answers or essays or papers. There's only so much you can do without burning out. So it's worth taking a step back and working with your group, with your discipline, and with wonderful sites that are out there now to find how to integrate that as a discouragement rather than as a police compliance level thing. And it also has to do with some of the populations who are the first to misuse it. It's the people with 3 jobs. It's the people with English second language access. It's people who are reskilling and are missing huge gaps because they haven't been in high school for 10, 12 years. So, you know, you want to discourage it, but you also don't want to punish people for their circumstances disproportionately to someone who is clever and knows how to leverage the technology. So policy is needed, and you have to be upfront, but it can't be the single guiding force for addressing AI misuse issues.
Absolutely, completely agree there, and I think many of us in attendance here today would. I do want to go back to something you mentioned as part of that process of interacting with your students around the policy and the misuses, and that is the real life application of, if you misuse or if you try to rely on this too heavily in any case, what could happen. I want to bring up this study done by Wharton. And I want to read through this. I usually don't do this, but I want to read through this because I think these words are so powerful, these numbers. The study overview is that nearly 1,000 students were divided into groups using either a standard GPT-4 interface, which is what we're going to call GPT base, right? So no real guardrails around it, just a large language model they had access to, or an enhanced version with learning safeguards like a GPT tutor, like an instructional AI style of large language model. And then the performance was measured during practice sessions and exams. So here's the short-term results, right? The students who use the GPT base, the unguarded Wild West style large language model, improved their practice session performance by 48%. A good number, a very large number, right? But those who used the instructional AI version, the guardrailed version, improved their practice session performance by 127%. Now, that's just short term, right? When it comes to long-term risks, the students who were in the Wild West large language model, no guardrails, it led to a 17% drop in exam performance because the AI was completely removed from both, right? They used AI in either form or fashion while they were preparing, but when it came to the exam, they removed the AI incomplete, and those who were practicing with the Wild West version, the GPT base, had a 17% drop, whereas those who used the GPT tutor while they were preparing had no negative impact on the exam performance after the AI was removed. I want to take a second to let that sink in for everybody, kind of connect it back to the AI levels of misuse that we spoke on the last slide. And then I want to hear from you, Miguel, and what you glean from this study's results.
Sure. So I think the 2 most legit ways of embedding AI and AI literacy, meaning teaching how AI can be used, are personalization, allowing a student to understand concepts based on what they already know. And I'm going to put an example in the chat of something that we used for personalization, which was, I have a student, doesn't consider themselves a great student. They love basketball. So terms that are explained relative or in metaphors related to basketball will stick better until they enter the mastery phase. So the cheat version of GPT is explain stock market volatility in terms of a basketball game. And we demo that. And then we say, well, a better prompt is to translate it to how you understand the world so that you're thinking about it and then can use it in the real world. So changing that explain, which has no guardrails, says, give me the answer, to translate the various key parts and concepts of stock market volatility in terms of a basketball game, changed how they get results. That's a tutoring style, a personalization style. I'm still going to ask them questions in my discipline, but they can find metaphors that allow them to confidently express what they learn and make connections and connect the dots. So personalization is exactly what guardrailed GPT or GPT-related technologies can do. With regards to the tutoring style support, here are the things that work without diminishing student value, hopefully without having that drop in exam performance. GPT used for practice, for examples beyond those the teacher gives them, for role play and review and suggestions, for coming up with acronyms to remember things. So that's not where all their energy is. In other words, tutoring style support of AI, which a lot of great EDU tech, and I'm going to kind of give you guys a plug here, the writing lab from Packback has that ethos, has that idea, and I'm exploring how to integrate that with peer review, with ability to use it as another assistant, or as the one student referred to it, he said, well, it's like having a NPC companion, like in a video game for education. You use it to support you, but if you make it do everything, you're not doing your mission, you're not doing your quest, you're not getting anything other than watching someone else play in the game. So when it's done well, tutoring style support, guardrails, so you're not getting answers, but you're getting thought process and connections and translations. Technical term is paratranslation. So again, my field is comparative literature. So being able to translate the heart of meaning rather than the exact word is key. GPT can help you with that. And again, I'm looking at your writing lab as a good example of use of guardrails to allow students to explore, but not create end products that's not theirs.
And hopefully drive results that are similar to this, right? We would love to see 127% increase in practice sessions that would hopefully then translate to some form of positive performance on the exam, but certainly no negative performance, right? Hopefully taking their thought process to the next level. Before we jump into our next poll, as we come sort of to the close of our session today, I want to take a second to talk about, or just to hit on something that I saw in the chat. Somebody said, I can't get around anywhere without my phone GPS these days, right? And that's sort of a conversation to have. What's the difference in learning where the streets are by heart versus using a phone GPS? I just want to hit on this to say that I always put my phone GPS on in the car, not because I don't know where I'm going, but just because, hey, it helps me with my thought process in knowing where traffic is, right? I wouldn't be able to know what traffic looks like on my commute, even though I know what my commute is. So it takes my thought ability to the next level to inform what my next decisions are. And that could be related something to like a GPT tutor, where it can give students more information to broaden their perspective and make decisions further on where they go next.
And one of the unintended side effects and kind of right timing was GPT's role in increasing student confidence post-COVID learning loss. So there's lots of studies out there about how the learning process was disrupted, students lost confidence, all the changes and worry. Well, if they have a baseline to compare and kind of use as that NPC companion in a tutoring support, that confidence comes back in a legit way. And they feel that, okay, maybe COVID or other circumstances or life circumstances or educational backgrounds or being first in their family to go to college and feeling lost. It provides that companion support or that training support for the quest and mission where they're going into education, which most are going, I want a better job, economic mobility, but then they get this +1 of better thinking, better participant citizenship, better roles as people, which is something I think we need, especially as we are global players, more than caste and class systems used to allow us to be.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Very well said. Very well said. Let's jump into a quick poll as we begin to wrap things up. Please, please, please participate here. It'll be on your screen in just a second as Peter pulls it up. But what do you believe is the most critical aspect of AI literacy for students? What do you believe is the most critical aspect of AI literacy for students? And I'd love to hear your thoughts on this as well, Miguel.
Okay, so I'm a little biased because my master's in in intelligence studies was about disinformation and misinformation. And in my field, we work deeply with the librarians and such to validate sources and kind of create informed decisions around both intentional disinformation and then just circumstantial misinformation or misappraised. So I think if you can only embed in your current content without changing, because again, the idea is to use AI as a tool agnostically, applied AI, not technical AI. Use it to support the student in whatever it is you teach. If you focus on, well, here's how hallucinations work. Here's where the prompt writing could have been more specific to avoid it. Here's how you catch exceptions and avoid them. You're embedding thinking in a way that reciprocates in other areas and other courses and as a lifelong learner. So a healthy skepticism, or instead of critical thinking, which has been politicized a little bit right now, second order thinking. What's next? What's the context? What happens next? If you showcase model AI tool use to improve learning in the context of make sure you're a participant, a human in the loop, a filter for what comes out. Because if you think about it, it's trained on comment sections and things like that on the internet. So if you look for some important advice and you're following comment section, hopefully you know, okay, that one's from a bot. Hopefully you know, okay, that sounds really, really wrong. If you embed AI tools with that reflection element, you don't have to change what you teach. You're just allowing them to become more participant in using technology to better understand the concepts and better personalize the takeaways and the outcomes.
A human filter. A human filter is
Great way of putting it.
Well, you put it there, my friend. I just took it from your words. I love thinking of it that way. Being able to see the information that the large language models give you, that the AI give you, and putting a human lens over the top of it, where you get to make the decisions. You get to see the results there. About 47% learning to critically assess AI generated content, knowing when and how to responsibly use AI in academic discussions at 34%. Interesting that only 9% developing technical skills to use AI tools. Very, very interesting considering where the world of AI is going in the job market as we look towards the future as well, and how useful those skills would be. Let's continue our conversation because this is something that I think you can speak really, really well to. One of the hot topics these days, more and more teachers, administrators, and institutions are realizing the importance of embracing AI within their practices, right? But that has been a long first step in taking AI from novelty to a realized tool. But actually teaching with AI, teaching AI itself, utilizing it in a helpful manner may be an even more daunting step to take because of the ethics and responsibility pieces at large. What has your practice been like in teaching students to embrace AI and also the responsibility they have in doing so?
Gotcha. So I'll give a quick summary. So when talking about AI ethics, which is great, it has to do with, in some cases, compliance. What are the consequences? You get sued on the job, you lose your job, you get a bad grade. If you teach it as a novelty or a technical aspect, you lose the consequences of that. So embedding it within current events and things that do not have to do with technology. So an example is the Defiance Act currently in Congress. The Defiance Act currently being considered in Congress is about deep faking pornography and other things as revenge porn or other issues. And that's now a legal issue with a lot of consequences. So if you show that responsible use of AI improves life for everyone indirectly, and how it's considered a question now in everywhere from law to responsibility to your ultimate success, you get better than here's a real great demonstration tool, which is there to catch attention, but embed. Do not make it just a one-shot. Embed within your existing documents. As an instructor, you know what works and doesn't work. Leverage that. Use it just as a tool and not as a showcase, and you'll get better students and ultimately better citizens.
Beautiful bow I think you're putting on our conversation here, and I want to jump straight to our Q&A portion of the day. Peter's got some nice questions queued up for us that we can maybe get your perspective on in our last 3 or 4 minutes here. The first one, let's see. Let's take this first one. From Potter, I would like to know where can students working towards licensure to teach in a preschool classroom go to find information about using AI in their classroom? How would the AI work? Most likely it would not be the children using it, but how can the teachers use it themselves? Where would they go to find some information like that?
Gotcha. So believe it or not, like right here, so I'm in Chandler and Gilbert in Arizona, and our Chandler Unified School District has a K-8 AI policy. They had to brew it because it's showing up in different ways. There's cultural references. Those who have siblings are using it and advising. So simply checking on the websites of your local K-8 or K-6 school districts and searching for AI policy will give you a great insight as to what's allowed and not allowed from the teaching side at those grades, which then eventually makes itself up to a baseline, a normalized experience. Like in 2022, we inherited some high school students that were using it. I learned a lot from that. And now teachers in that K-12 space are learning from that and implementing that at their policy level. So simply doing a Google search, your local K-8, see what they do, will give you an idea and a baseline to be better informed.
Thank you so much. One last question before we jump out of here today. We've heard you talk about one specific assignment, but Eric Brinkman would love for you to talk a little bit about what kind of other assignments you use with your students in AI.
Gotcha. So after a lot of pilots and a lot of missteps, the red teaming is the one that I use probably in the second or third lesson. I'm going to put one of the seminal lessons in the chat group, and that's basically creating a baseline, explore 14 different functions, choose one of what AI can be used for. And that deciphers myths, shows practical application, and gets them hands-on. And then for the rest of the semester, so a 16-week semesters, we have 10 specific graded but low stakes discussion groups on different aspects. And that includes deciphering disinformation, misinformation, finding ways that it directly is in use already in your intended field of interest or career. And there are all kinds of things, but that one assignment I put is probably in the second week of classes, very low stakes, very hands-on. And it also gives you 2 instant pre and post assessments. It tells you who in your classrooms are very skilled, so you can keep an eye for misuse or leverage them as group leaders. And what's the level of fear? What's the level of trepidation, so that you know how to focus and what not to do and what not to overdo in the classroom.
Thank you so much, Miguel. I want to take this last 30 seconds to just say thank you to everyone for attending today. Thank you for the league for joining us in our webinar series here. This is number 12. If you're curious at all, you've got an email up there on your screen, curious@packback.co. You can also go to packback.co /webinars to see any of the other webinars that we have done here as a part of this series and others. Peter has also let me know that within a couple days you'll get the recording as well as some other resources come to you just for attending today. So once again, getting everybody out of here on time. Thank you so much for joining us today. Miguel, any last wrap-up thoughts, my friend?
Well, a little thank you to Packback, because you guys are doing it right in embedding the AI without the novelty aspect and not doing a cash grab based on that. What I'm seeing from your discussion groups and the writing lab, which I'm really excited about, has that element built in. So, hey, EDU tech companies are doing it right. Leverage that with what's around and other instructors. And I think we will continue the teaching mission without feeling subservient or in fear of the AI impact.
Thank you so much, Miguel. Thank you, Dr. Glasper. Thank you, Cynthia. Thank you, Peter, for hosting. And we'll see y'all next time.
Take care, everybody. Good luck out there.